Looney Tunes Back in Action is adapted from the 2003 semi-live action animated movie of the same name and is one of many of its kind. You see, back in those days, it was super common for a theatrical film to get a licensed tie-in game based on it, and surprisingly, some of them can range from being actually good classics to bargain bin bullshit. I wouldn't exactly call Back in Action a classic per se, but at the very least it was fun to play. Also, this is not the only licensed movie tie-in game for the Looney Tunes franchise. There was a Space Jam basketball game that came out for the PS1, as it was the only other theatrical movie involving these characters at the time. Now, Back in Action was developed by Warthog Games and published by Warner Bros. Interactive. It follows the basic plot of the movie where Bugs and Daffy have to take back the Blue Monkey Diamond from the evil chairman and save the world in the process. I should mention this game only focuses on the tunes themselves and not the human characters from the movie, which is to be expected and probably for the best. As you can imagine, this style of game is a single-player platformer. Wow, shocking, I know, right? And you play as Bugs and Daffy as they travel across the world from Hollywood, Paris, France, Las Vegas, Area 52, yes, Area 52, not 51, and the Amazon jungle, just like in the movie. Both characters play slightly different and have special abilities that complement each other, like Bugs can double jump and dig underground, while Daffy can flutter as a short glide and swim underwater. Both are necessary to get past certain obstacles, and you'll be frequently changing between them throughout the game. Outside of that, they also get to use these costume doors that will give the player a unique power or event to interact with for a few seconds. Now, the costumes don't get used super duper often, but they do add a little extra something to break up the regular gameplay. The main goal here in Back in Action is to collect monkeys and monies. Now, I know this is probably starting to sound a lot like Ape Escape, but trust me, it's really not. The monkeys were people who got transformed by the Blue Diamond, and they must be collected by doing various challenges and mini-games within each stage. These challenges can range from all sorts of different things like a platforming segment, hunting wabbits, fighting a bull, gambling, popping balloons, racing Martians, or river rapids from Hurricane Harbor. Of course, some of these challenges are better to control and/or play than others and will serve as the majority of what you're doing throughout this adventure. Monkeys can also be found by rescuing Tweety from Sylvester a few times, finding the frog statues, collecting birdseed, or just buying them off of Foghorn Leghorn. And whenever you're not doing that, you'll be collecting money to travel to new areas. In fact, the game will forcibly kick you back into the level to get more money before you can even advance, which incentivizes completing more challenges, which means collecting more monkeys. Thankfully, you don't have to collect everything to beat the game, but the activities are there if you really want to be a completionist, which I am not if we're being honest. Outside of the main story, you can also check out extra behind-the-scenes stuff, mess with cheat codes, and play the Roadrunner minigame, which was my absolute favorite thing to do in the whole game. And even though it's mainly used to collect more monkeys, you can still play it whenever you want to get a high score or just for fun. I found the gameplay for Back in Action to be okay for the most part, and that's not just the nostalgia talking. The camera can be bothersome at times, a jump here or there can fail to work properly, and of course the button mashing sections were annoying as they always were in these PS2 games. But like I said, for the most part, Back in Action control-wise was decent, especially compared to another game that I'll be talking about soon. I'd say it's far from the worst in this type of genre like some people may think, and I actually kinda enjoyed revisiting this game again. Having the characters banter back and forth with each other can lead to some funny moments and made the more mundane sections of the game a little more tolerable. Even though I will admit they do talk just a bit too often sometimes, well, at least the voice acting is good, as well as the music in general. And I guess you could say the story is not too shabby either. It definitely feels like a Looney Tunes story, and the game differentiates itself enough from the movie that it can stand as its own separate thing. I feel like that's something most of these licensed games end up getting wrong. If games like Chamber of Secrets, SpongeBob the Movie, and Toy Story 2 can be good, I don't see why this one can't either. I mean, seriously, do you remember seeing anything like this in the actual movie?
It's now or never.
Yo! You're a very big monkey.
Gee, I was sure I'd get to be in the big boss battle. Frankly, I'm tickled pink.
So, for everything it's worth, that's about all I have to say on this one. Compared to the many other Looney Tunes games that I've played through recently, this one is average. Definitely not my favorite title, as you'll soon discover, but surprisingly not terrible either. I quite enjoyed returning to this game after so many years, and it was nice to have a little reminder of the good old days. Taz Wanted was developed by Blitz Games and published by Infogrames. For the longest time I thought it said Infor Games. I guess my eyes were playing tricks on me. Now, I'm not even sure where to begin with this game. Like I said, it subverted my expectations because it was not just a decent game, but a really fun and underrated game in my opinion. Many of its aspects still hold up fairly well to this day, like the graphics, gameplay, and music. I'd say for a game that's over 20 years old, it still looks pretty good. The cel-shaded art style and bright colors look pleasing to the eye and make the game stand out amongst the other Looney titles. And just about everything Taz does makes you feel like a crazy little devil as you spin around tearing shit up and wreaking havoc like the tornado of doom that he is. You know, now I'm starting to see why he's wanted.
Somebody looking for me?
So, the plot of this game is pretty simple for what we have here. Basically, Taz is wanted by Yosemite Sam, and Sylvester, and Daffy, and Wile E. Coyote, and Elmer Fudd, and pretty much everybody. The sad part is he didn't even do anything wrong. He just wanted to take She-Devil on a date and they both end up getting captured and put in a zoo. Naturally, he escapes confinement and with the assistance of Tweety Bird, he travels around to various themed locations to rescue his lady and destroy all of Sam's wanted posters to regain his freedom. There are 4 main hub worlds you visit that will lead into the levels and feature a boss battle at the very end. Each level contains 7 signs that must be destroyed to progress to the next area, and these unique jungle gym style locations feel expansive and are filled with plenty of collectibles, bonuses, and secrets to uncover. I found the level design to be pretty cool in general. No 2 locations are exactly the same, and most of the signs as well as the method you go by to break them is very creative and had me scratching my head a few times. Sure, the map will tell you how to find them, and sure, Tweety will give you slight hints as to how to break them, but really he's just trying to tell bad puns.
If you can get through the maze, you'll be amazed how much control you've got. This one will drive you up the wall. See if you can solve this puzzle, Mr. Putty Taz. It's fantastic. Don't we have ice for you, Putty Taz? Uh-oh, I've got a sinking feeling that ship isn't gonna be around much longer. Can you spot this one? It's probably right under your nose.
Throughout the entirety of the game, Taz will be pursued by Sam and his animal catchers. And once they've got you in their clutches, the money you earn from destroying signs will decrease. However, if you piss off Sam enough, he will raise your bounty, which will definitely happen during this game.
I'll have your hide, Barman!
Getting caught can be pretty annoying sometimes, but other than that, every other enemy won't pose much of a threat to Taz. At the most, they'll just rough you up a bit. Now, it's the obstacles that really make the difference. especially the dynamite littered all over the place, which can slow you down when you're in a hurry, or these goddamn jack-in-the-box things that send you flying if you get too close to them. It really makes you think about how to approach each situation so that you can get to the sign in the best way possible. Now, as far as the controls go, occasionally they feel a bit slippery while doing precise platforming, but overall, I thought Taz was really fun to play as. Of course, Taz can spin as usual, eat objects and spit them back out as projectiles, and he can scream or roar, whichever you want to call it. Honestly, I played the whole game without ever needing it, so I'm not sure what its purpose was. But what's really cool about the spin move is that it can be used to activate timed switches and traverse faster through the level. Another thing that is cool is how the soundtrack has dynamic renditions depending on if you're walking, spinning, or sneaking. So as you can imagine, I really love the spin move. Also, just like the dynamite, there are other pickups that give Taz a momentary effect, like invisibility, fire breath, higher jumps, and chaos blast. I also really love the costume mechanic that allows you to change your appearance for a while. I can't say for sure, but this might be the first time in the franchise that lets you do this, aside from Back in Action, which came out the following year. The costumes in this game give you a new ability that makes defeating the animal catchers possible, so they are very useful. I'll say they're always a treat to use, however I really hate having to go back to the telephone booth to pick them up every single time, but that's alright I guess. The gameplay doesn't really suffer because of it. And I can assure you there is plenty of fun to be had in Taz Wanted. Like I said, the open playground packed with nooks and crannies, the unique theme variety from stage to stage, and problem-solving elements make this game go from good to great in my eyes. Topped off with decent-looking graphic style and a fantastic soundtrack make for a very solid experience. Now, I'm sure a handful of you who are familiar with these Looney Tunes games or have been following the channel for a while can notice that this title is quite similar to another Infogrames installment called Sheep Raider. The game is similar in a way that it requires a lot of thought and cleverness to overcome its obstacles and get from level to level. I'd say much more than in Taz Wanted. Mind you, Taz Wanted didn't make my brain explode like Sheep Raider, but it still offered a sufficient challenge here and there. Oh, and don't worry, I'll have more than enough to say about that game when the time is right. Anyway, for now, I conclude that Taz Wanted is one of my favorite Looney Tunes games of all time. I'm genuinely shocked by how good it was. Looney Tunes Acme Arsenal has always been an odd game to talk about for me. Sure, it's the typical 3D platformer that you'd expect from this franchise, but the studio behind it decided to add a little seasoning by including guns and beat-em-up mechanics. And these new mechanics may or may not work very well. Of course, Looney Tunes games have never been a stranger to having combat, but it wasn't the sole focus until now, I believe. Most of what you'll be doing is taking out waves of robots and enemies by stringing together very simple combos and using one of the many weapons laying around. Being that this is one of the later Looney Tunes games to come out, it does somewhat feel like the elements of many past titles have been culminated into it. But that doesn't really say much considering what we actually got here. Acme Arsenal was developed by Red Tribe, which is a small studio that I'd never heard of until playing this game. They don't exactly have an impressive track record to say the least. Also, Acme Arsenal was published by Warner Bros. Games, of course, and something interesting about that is how this game has a sister title developed by WayForward called Duck Amuck for the Nintendo DS. I've never played it and I don't necessarily plan to, but it does look kinda fun. Also, it somehow managed to have a higher on average review score than Acme Arsenal, so that should really tell you something. Anyway, this game centers around a time travel themed plot where most of the main toons must travel to different eras or dimensions or something so that they can save their ancestors from being snuffed out by this itty-bitty evil scientist, Dr. Frankenbeans. I'm surprised Warner Bros. Wanted to do yet another time travel story, but I guess there's gotta be some kind of plot. Also, I don't blame you if you didn't even know what the plot was about, because the game does a poor job of giving context to what the hell is even going on most of the time. It opens with Bugs falling out of the sky where he ends up fighting robots with Marvin the Martian, and then after that they take a rocket ship back to their base so they can start time traveling. A lot of stuff that happens in this game just kind of feels like random out of context moments, and at one point everybody is eating Thanksgiving dinner for some reason. It just seems like a string of events with the toons chilling and hanging around until the next level starts. Now, I know it may not seem like much of a story, and honestly it isn't, but there's definitely some things to remember about it. Admittedly, the graphics and animation in the cutscenes look pretty great and the best they've ever looked. Even though each scene was kind of all over the place, it was always nice to see them. The same goes for the character models themselves. Also, this game is packed with little references to old Looney Tunes media scattered all over the place, so if you happen to catch a few that you recognize, I'm sure it'll be appreciated. This also applies to the gameplay too. Oh yeah, and to say about the gameplay, how do I put this? It's not terrible per se, but being that it is a beat 'em up, you really gotta add more flavor to keep it interesting the whole way through. And yes, obviously we have the guns to utilize this time, but that still didn't stop the combat from feeling repetitive and monotonous after a while. The guns are kind of fun to use, but strangely their damage output is not as effective as melee attacking. Which is weird considering that's like the main draw of this title. Well, I guess it also depends on what gun you get. Most of the available weapons to choose from are dropped by defeated enemies or can be purchased by collecting coins. And if you pick up the yellow energy bars, you can strengthen said weapon. It does help out a little bit, but honestly, most of the time, a good ground pound attack or two will usually take out most enemies, or at the very least stun them. Also, it's pretty strange how both Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam are not playable characters despite being known for using guns. Besides that, there will occasionally be a button or switch to press or some kind of puzzly thing to do, an easy boss battle to fight every now and then, or a running/vehicle section, but they're kinda half-baked unfortunately. Especially the driving part near the end. It's like probably one of two moments like that in the whole game. And even with all that, I still found the gameplay as a whole to be a bit lackluster compared to previous titles. Which is a shame because you can tell some genuine effort was put in to make this a new high-octane experience for the toons, and the fact that this is the last game of its kind to ever come out in a long time. The game itself controls well enough, I'd say. All my button inputs worked as well as they were supposed to most of the time, but doing the same basic 3 or 4 hit combo over and over again on hordes of enemies got kinda boring, and the guns themselves, while fun to use, didn't make much of a difference, I'm afraid. Now, if I remember correctly, the only other modes in this game outside of the main story are battling against friends in multiplayer or this god-awful Wile E. Coyote chase thing. You see, they tried to recreate my favorite minigame from back in action, but this time it freaking sucks. The controls are stiff and awkward, and you'll constantly be hitting stuff that pops out of the ground, which is annoying. It's just not very fun to me and easily the most disappointing thing in Acme Arsenal. Now, I know this review so far has been mostly critique, but returning to this game gave me a very mixed feeling. It's far from being completely bad, and there are a few decent elements to it, but overall, as much as I hate to say it, I found this one to be below average. I'd much rather play Back in Action or Taz Wanted again, or even the PS1 games. Looney Tunes Space Race was developed by Australian studio Melbourne House and published by Infogrames once again. Since this title started out on the Dreamcast, I can't say what exactly the differences are between it and the PS2 version. But what I can already say is that Space Race is a solid game overall. Even though it came out over 20 years ago, it still looks fantastic to this day. The cel-shaded art design for the characters and track themes is pretty nice to look at, as well as the sound effects and music. In a similar fashion to other titles like it in the genre, Space Race features all the bells and whistles that you'd expect with a nice coat of Looney Tunes paint all over it. There's an okay selection of characters to choose from, each with their own unique vehicles and style of play. Honestly, I didn't feel that much of a difference between them control-wise, aside from a few other characters that you unlock later on. Now, there really isn't much of a story in Space Race per se, but that's alright, given that it's a racing game. Basically, all the tunes assemble to race for the world's amusement on this Acme News Network TV show hosted by Foghorn Leghorn and Lola Bunny. It's not much, but it's a justification to go around racing, so sounds good to me. And you know, while I'm on the topic, it's pretty cool how you get to play as some of these characters that don't usually get to be playable in games or even have spin-off games of their own. The same sentiment could be said about its PS1 precursor, Looney Tunes Racing, but don't worry, we'll get to that title eventually, trust me. Now, the main thing to do here besides local races is tournaments against the computer to win cup trophies and tokens. Or if not that, there's time trials and Acme events. The tournaments were always fun to do and hilariously all named after carrots. Even on the hardest difficulty, the computer-controlled racers don't put up too much of a fight honestly, unless you get blown up by a weapon right before the finish line or fall off the edge, which will most definitely happen a few times. It can slow you down considerably or make or break the race, but it's not that bad really. As long as you get the most points at the end of the cup standings, you will win no matter what. And collecting as many tokens as you can will be very useful for buying extras in the Galleria or unlocking new characters. I'd say the real difficulty comes from the Acme events, which features races with a set of different rules or conditions to follow in order to win. I found these to be the most interesting as it takes the mechanics and flips them on its head. Sometimes the common items will become obstacles and they can really make a race more crazy and chaotic than ever before. There are some races where the track is filled with these Toontown black holes all over the place, and you'll constantly be pulled into them unless you have invincibility on. Or objects will rain down from the sky, or all the items will be changed to bombs and rockets so you can really have a blast. And speaking of the items, I know it's par for the course that these racing games have weapons and tools to slow down your opponent, but the items here in Space Race really help capture the madness that is Looney Tunes, and were always satisfying to use. You can summon an anvil, piano, or elephant to crush your opponent flat, send them flying with a giant boxing glove, disintegrate them with a laser beam, or confuse them with a cloud of spray paint. And even if you do get hit by them, which can be annoying, it doesn't take too long to recover. Like I said, depending on how and when they are used can make or break a race for some people. Also, you know what else can make or break a race sometimes? The controls themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, the controls are easy to learn and frankly I didn't have too much trouble with them, but I can see some having a hard time getting used to the type of vehicles here. Many of the tracks have sharp, twisty corners that can make you fly off the edge from over or under correcting your vehicle, and sometimes if you don't build up enough momentum, you will completely miss a ramp jump and fall to your doom. It may take a little getting used to, but I can assure you it's still very fun and not as clunky as I'm making it sound. Also, for goodness sake, if you collect enough cans of gas to use your speed boost, it would be wise to only use it on straightaway paths because trying to steer yourself back onto the track going bird speed is gonna give you a bad day. One of my favorite things to do in these racing games is drifting. Unfortunately, that is near impossible to do when you're flying a freaking hoverbike. Nonetheless, I think the general idea of racing in space was executed rather well in this game. The graphics, mechanics, and overall style was decent, accentuated by a damn good soundtrack, makes for a worthwhile experience. I'm still genuinely shocked by how good this game holds up after all these years. And when I said the soundtrack was good, I mean it's freaking great. I really loved the funky space age aesthetic they were going for. I ended up remembering the music from each of the stages more than the actual visuals themselves. Like, yeah, it's really good. Here, have a listen. So with that, I conclude that Looney Tunes Space Race is a worthy addition to the kart racing genre that I'm sure anybody can pick up and have a good time with. Despite all the praises I've sang about it though, I do still kinda like Looney Tunes Racing on PS1 just a little bit more for the simplicity and similarities it shares with CTR, my favorite racing game of all time. But that doesn't mean sleep on Space Race. I think it's a fair contender amongst the other greats in the genre, even though it's just a licensed cartoon game. If you want to try it out for yourself, it's available on Dreamcast and PS2. Now, I'm not sure who the heck even still owns a Sega Dreamcast these days, but it's there regardless if you want to play it. Alright, it seems we have finally crossed the finish line for this Looney Tunes PS2 games marathon. I really hope y'all enjoyed it and desire to see more like it soon. Within a month or two, I will return to talk about the Looney Tunes games on PS1, and who knows, I may even experiment with other types of content as well. Feel free to share your thoughts on this marathon in the comments section below. I had a lot of fun putting these videos together, and I can't wait to do it all over again very, very soon. Because trust me, this Cartoon Network Warner Bros. Marathon is still far, far from over. So once again, thanks for watching another episode of Anubis Black Games. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.